Hello and welcome to ThePapare.com as we bring you the second edition of Offload. Now, after the second weekend of the Rugby World Cup 2015, it's been another fantastic weekend. The most looked forward to game in this World Cup so far is under our belt. We'll be talking about that in some great detail with our guests in the studio today, Jeevan Gunitilaka and Abdullah Yusuf, one-time captains of their respective first 15s, but now here to analyze the Rugby World Cup 2015, the biggest game as you spoke about, guys, England and Wales. Everybody cocksure that England were going to win this, including England, and Wales came and stole it at the end. Jeevan, what do you put it down to?
It was a cracker of a game, as you said, Shanaka. But I think it's a game that England lost. They dominated the game for, I would say, 70 minutes. Wales barely had 15 people on the park, and just some, I would say, some poor decisions at the end, and they just let it slip.
Abdullah, it's strange to see a team like England, who are playing at home, succumb to this sort of pressure against the Wales side that has been decimated through injury. But the last 20 minutes of that match, where do you think it all went wrong for them?
I think the major difference in that second half was when most of the subs came on. I think in terms of their structure, it seemed a bit disjointed during the during the last quarter of the game, and also I felt that they were trying to defend rather than just continuously trying to attack, and I think that just gave Wales a sniff, and they just took it. And I think you have to give a lot of credit to Wales as well, the way they just persisted despite players falling like 9 pins every time. So I think a lot of credit should go to Wales as well.
Looking at the quality of the players, King Abdullah, you spoke about this earlier. Owen Farrell was outstanding, and Dan Biggar was even better, wasn't he? I mean, look at the guy coming in and replacing Lee Halfpenny. How do you deal with that sort of pressure?
I mean, it's just fantastic. I mean, a lot of people are saying that Dan Biggar, had the game of his life, and I don't think you can argue with that opinion. But even I think a lot of credit should be given to Farrell as well, the way he held his nerve. I think the circumstances of which he came into the team, there was a lot of controversy with him being brought in instead of Mike Ford. But I think he showed nerves of steel to slot all penalties, and I think both kickers had a 100% record, which I think was just fantastic.
Jeevan, there we see Mike Brown coming through and saving England once again, but that channel really should have been cut open a little while earlier, because I didn't think Brad Barrett is very good moving laterally on defence, and I'm surprised that Wales didn't attack more through George North.
Yeah, correct, Shanaka. Defensively, a lot of issues have been raised in relation to the alignment. Maybe it has a lot to do with where he's playing, whether he should play inside centre, outside centre. But then you bring a person like Sam Burgess, who can only play 12. So I think that's where, if you see this try, the one that really sealed the game, you would see that Barrett actually rushed in defence and came off his line, and that created the gap that created that try.
Yeah, it was pure defensive alignment, wasn't it, Abdullah? The coach will go back and be really annoyed with that.
Yes, because I think the plan was there to just hold your line and drift across, but you just saw Barrett just shooting, and I think the Wales outside centre had the presence of mind to actually skip, and the ball went to the wing, and then after that the overlap was created. It just shows that sometimes you try to shift players from one position to the other, even if it's like from 12 to 13, it can make a big difference, because Barrett is very much an inside centre. So he was forced to play this game at outside centre purely for the fact that they wanted Burgess in as well, and maybe to keep guys like Jamie Roberts in check. But it just shows the very thin margins of international rugby.
Guys, you all are both coaches as well. How much did Stuart Lancaster's calls affect this game? I mean, out of 10, how much?
I think Abdullah and I would probably differ on that. But Abdullah did raise a very point. The benches, the players coming off the bench made a big difference. And England's changes, in hindsight, everyone is a pundit. In hindsight, it didn't work out well. There were certain changes. Bringing in Ford and taking off Burgess had a very negative, impact on the game, because anyone who had, as coaches, we could say that you're looking at gaining territory and maintaining your lead, as opposed to trying to, attack the Welsh defence, which was weakened by several injuries and all that. So it was there for the taking. So the changes didn't work. So he made Warren Gatton look a genius.
Abdullah, looking at the stats, actually, there's really nothing in it except that stat at the end there. Penalties conceded, 12 to England and 11 to Wales. But most of those penalties were at the business end of the game, wasn't it? And Dan Biggar kept his nerve.
The business end as well as in England's half. I think their discipline at the breakdown really let them down. We're talking mainly of the last 20 minutes, but even before that, in the first 60 minutes, Wales were all at sea. I mean, England was playing the game at such a pace, and they were controlling the game as well. But just when they got into the half, they used to concede just silly penalties at the breakdown. And at this level, you just can't do that. And with Dan Biggar on fire, he just made England pay. And that also just helped Wales to continuously stay in the game. And then in the last 20 minutes, England just imploded, as it was obvious.
Well, that was pretty much the end of that as far as England are concerned. They are now facing a real crisis. Do they actually manage to make it out of their group? The pool of death, that's something that will be up for grabs next Saturday when England play Australia in that all-important clash at Twickenham. But before that, we've got Wales who play Fiji, and then we have Tonga who play Namibia later on as well. That's on the 29th. And then we have France versus Canada and New Zealand versus Georgia, all coming up before that crunch game. But Abdullah, you spoke about staying in the game, and this is one aspect I really want to highlight because it's a bit of a bee in my bonnet, because a lot of the minnows are, I feel, not being allowed to stay in the game because of some 50-50 calls going against them. We'll look at the Scotland versus Japan game rather briefly, and you look at this try that Mark Bennett scored. And after all the reviews and replays that we've seen of the games that involve England, even Gareth Davies' try against England was reviewed just to make sure. But this time around, this try, which for me, for all money, he hasn't scored it yet, and the next one he puts it down and his foot is in touch. For me, it wasn't even reviewed. And at that stage, Japan were trailing 17 points to 10. This took it to 24-10, and that's when the whole floodgates opened for Scotland. So things like this, how much do they impact the next 4 years for Japan?
Well, I don't think it'll impact Japan in the next 4 years. I think they've made it for the next 4 years after their win against the Springboks. But yes, I think just if you go back to the first match of the tournament, after I think the referee awarded a try to Fiji, then the replay came on the screen, and then he went, I think Ford was almost getting ready to take the conversion, and then he saw it on the big screen, and then he asked for it to be reviewed. So it's a bit surprising that it didn't happen this time, but well, I guess that's the way it goes.
Yeah, that is pretty much the way it goes. But take nothing away from Scotland; they're playing well.
Correct. Yeah, I mean they've surprised everybody with the way they've approached. They've seemed to have covered all angles. Sometimes it's a lot easier to do that when you have a smaller squad. When you're underestimated, you kind of slip under the radar. So Vern Cotter has really got the best out of his team, and that it's showing in the results.
Speaking about the other few games in the last weekend, we had Australia who ran up the highest score of the tournament so far, 65-3 against Uruguay. And then we had Scotland who beat the USA 39 points to 16, another good win for the Scots, and Ireland beating Romania 44-10. Just going back to that Australia game, Abdullah, 65-3, is that enough of a statement to the rest of the Southern Hemisphere sides?
I think so, but at the same time, I think Michael Cheika rested a lot of his players. So it was primarily a Wallabies B side, if you may say, that took the field. Considering all that, I think they will be pretty happy with their workout, and I think a lot of the reserves, the guys who will be coming off the bench, would also have got a run. So I think Australia in a pretty good place at the moment, and if they can beat England, then I think that'll pretty much seal that group.
Wales versus Fiji, Jivan. It's another crunch match for Wales. They've got little or no players to pick either. Do you think the Fijians will be sensing a bit of dragon's blood there? Definitely.
Fiji haven't played as well as we expected. They've got some quality players who play top division teams, especially the Super 15 franchises. Wales have come after battering. They won the game, but they lost half their side. They're not going to recover in 4 days, 5 days. So they're going to be weak. They're going to have one eye on the tougher game in the group because the group is not sealed as yet. They'll also be mindful of the fact that that England have a bonus point there. So everything to play for, and this is going to prove to be a very close game because Fiji are going to throw everything at it, and that's a time when a Fijian team can be most dangerous. and the way they play, is something that, if you're off your mark and if you're not watching, you can, they've lost to Fiji before, so it can happen again.
Yeah, it is going to be a really interesting game. That one, Wales versus Fiji, that one is on the 1st of October. So make sure you tune into that as well. It's going to be an absolute cracking game, that's for sure. But let's talk about the groups now, because England-Wales, that affects the groups, the way in which these standings are at the moment. Let's look at the group of death. And here we have Australia nicely at the top of the group, and Wales with that win over England coming to second place, equal on points with England, but their head-to-head obviously is better, and then Fiji and Uruguay bringing up the rear. But if Fiji manage to beat Wales, gentlemen, that's going to really throw the cat among the pigeons here, and then we're going to be in a situation where we might be tied, and then it might come down to the head-to-head, because that's what's important. But then again, if Australia actually beat England on Saturday, that allows Wales pretty much a safe passage through. So this group, far from decided.
No, absolutely. And I think Fiji will silently be fancying their chances purely because of the turnaround. Wales will have, it'll be just about 4 days turnaround. And that match was of such high intensity. It would have taken a hell of a lot out of Wales. And I think with the injuries that they also have had to undergo, it's going to take a bit of a mental toll on the Welsh as well. But it'll be interesting to see how Wales front up for that game. But unfortunately for Fiji, I think Nemina Nodolo, he's been suspended for 2 weeks because I think of some foul play. So he won't be available, which also will be a bit of a factor for Fiji. But it may look strange, but I think it's going to be much closer than a lot of people think.
Mm-hmm. You think so?
Oh, definitely. And as Abdullah said, the game took a lot out of Wales, over the weekend. And I think it took a lot out of us watching it, so I can just imagine.
Exactly.
Let's look at Pool B now, because that had yielded some decent results as well. South Africa absolutely hammering Samoa out of sight, 46 points to 6, and they find themselves back in second place after that loss to Japan. Samoa in third place and Japan in fourth place, but even on points. That game is coming up as well. That's on Saturday. And then you have Scotland at the top. This is an unexpected turn of events. Scotland, Fern Cotter seems to have done his homework, Jeevan.
Oh yes, definitely. Like I said, they've been a side that's been consistently improving. Over the Six Nations tournament before the World Cup, they showed signs of what they can do, and I think they've just slipped under the radar. They've focused on their squad, on the limited amount of players, and as Abdullah would probably agree, sometimes when you have a smaller squad, the emphasis is more, and they've tied up a lot of loose ends. Japan did them a huge favour in the upset against South Africa. But then again, Scotland playing South Africa, then the mind games come in. How many times has Scotland beaten South Africa, if they have ever beaten them? I'm not quite sure. Probably you would know. But
can't remember.
Exactly. So, yeah, you never know. I think South Africa will still top the group. Scotland, I don't think is home and dry yet, because I would say, maybe Japan still has one more, roll of the dice. You never know.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting group. Abdullah, who do you see? South Africa, you're sure is going through?
I wouldn't be quite sure as yet. I'm just watching Scotland playing both their matches. I like the look of them. I think Vernon Cotter has done a very good job. He's drilled them. He's getting them to play to their strengths. He has got the backs moving a bit more, which is nice to see. I mean, Scotland would always find the tight five, just keeping it tight and just controlling the game there. But he's got their backs to start running. Guys like Stuart Hogg are getting more involved in the play. So I like the look of them. I'm just hoping that Japan will just have one more game, one more big game. Wouldn't that be great for Asian rugby? I mean, they're being the next host at the next World Cup. If they can just make it to that quarter-final, it'd be great. I'm fairly sure that Eddie Jones has something up his sleeve. Because even if you look at the Scotland game, he rested 7 of his starting players from the South African game because he just had to. So, once he brings them back in, if they have a bit of preparation time just to get a bit of rest and recuperation going, I think that they could cause teams like Samoa, because they've just got Samoa and USA at the moment remaining. So I'm sure they will fancy their chances. I don't think this group is decided by any stretch of the imagination.
Not by a long shot. So that's what you have here. Anamaki Mafi, hopefully he will be in time for fitness against USA and Samoa. So that's our version of Offload for this time, the second edition. We'll be joining you with the third edition after this massive game between England and Australia this weekend. Don't forget to tune into thepapare.com.